Let's dive right into a totally fascinating cartography of the mind today. We're going to be exploring a conceptual framework from a deeply intriguing source material known as the Prism of Odysseys. And honestly, what we're about to unpack in this explainer is going to fundamentally challenge how you view your own biology, your mind, and your moment-to-moment interaction with reality itself.
Think about how much time we spend marveling at the latest smartphone or some new AI model. But this striking axiom right here sets our stage perfectly. The ultimate hardware isn't made of metal, and it certainly isn't sitting in a server farm or floating around in a cloud somewhere. It is wired directly into your consciousness. Simply put, you are the technology.
Because we're dealing with a pretty new conceptual framework today, here is a quick roadmap for navigating the territory. We'll start with the ontological act of reading, then move to constellations of realities, explore consciousness as technology, ground it all with the epistemic grid, and finally wrap up with sovereignty and new existence.
All right, Section 1, the ontological act of reading, reading to transform.
The source material lays out a really interesting idea here. It says there are basically two categories of texts in the world. The first kind, they just inform. They simply increase what you know without actually modifying who you are. But the second category transmits forms. A text like the Prism of Odysseys isn't meant to just hand you new facts. It's an ontological act, literally designed to modify your fundamental perceptive structure. It completely changes how you organize what you see, hear, and feel in the ordinary world.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at this concept called the biogecio. It's a brilliant fusion of biology and software. Think of it as your biological operating system. Actively navigating this material literally rewrites and reconfigures this internal software, fundamentally shifting how you are deployed in the space field of reality. It is a full-on system update.
Moving right along to Section 2, Constellations of Realities, the New Coordinates of Existence.
So what actually happens during this internal update? Well, this sequence maps it out perfectly. It moves from the sheer absorption of words into the recalibration of your internal senses, progressing all the way to the deep modification of that biological software we just talked about. And finally, you reach an entirely new constellation of realities. You are literally processing existence differently.
Now, right at the heart of Step 2 is something the text calls the integral probe. And no, that's not just a poetic metaphor. It's defined as a built-in, multi-sensory biological antenna. It's the physical instrument inside you that recalibrates to help you navigate, measure, and harmonize your own biological resonance with the environments and realities around you.
Which brings us to Section 3, Consciousness as Technology, the forgotten primary hardware.
This leads us to arguably the most ambitious claim of this entire explainer. We've been so deeply conditioned to stare at external devices, completely forgetting that the most advanced technology is actually generating your thoughts right this very second. The text boldly states that this primary technology has been progressively made invisible to the very people who carry it, us.
What absolutely blows my mind here is how consciousness operates as an active physical field. Far from being just some abstract philosophical idea, your consciousness actively acts as a multispectral antenna. It emits measurable electromagnetic fields, it directly modulates your physiological states, and it even creates documentable synchronization with the biological systems of the people around you. You are, quite literally, a walking, breathing transmitter. Let's look at Section 4, the epistemic grid, grounding the paradigm.
I know all of this can sound incredibly abstract, which is exactly why the source applies a really strict epistemic grid here. It carefully anchors these concepts in reality by clearly labeling what is established scientific fact, things like neuroplasticity and the physical effects of contemplative states on the brain, backed by researchers like Davidson and Holtzel. Then it outlines active, open research frontiers like non-local interaction studied at Princeton. And finally, it clearly flags what is purely speculative hypothesis, like the idea of a suppressive mimic system. It proves we're building on a solid bedrock of established neurology before we venture out into the unknown.
Just to put things into perspective, established science tells us that the human brain alone burns through 20% of your body's total energy. That is a massive, undeniable power source continuously dedicated to running this internal hardware we call consciousness. It's a complete, energetic powerhouse.
And finally, Section 5, Sovereignty and New Existence, Reclaiming Your Frequency. So why does any of this rigorous mapping matter for your actual day-to-day life? Well, it matters because understanding this allows you to reclaim what the author calls your stem resonance. Think of this as your pure biological tuning. It is your ultimate baseline frequency before the noise of modern algorithms, daily stress, and external societal pressures interfere and pull you out of tune.
By actively leaning into these principles, you achieve what's called frequency sovereignty. First, you acknowledge your own primary technology. Then, you learn to filter out all that disruptive noise. You actively engage in the deployment of your being. Basically, you are fundamentally taking back the controls of your biological software to dictate how you exist in the world, rather than letting the external world dictate your state of mind to you. It's a real game changer.
Which leaves us with this final, genuinely profound thought to chew on today. Now that you are aware of your own ultimate operating system and the fact that you possess the most advanced, complex hardware on Earth right between your ears, how will you choose to use it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.